All right, y'all. Let's waiting on my PowerPoint to load up, or not. All right, so let's get started. We're on rocks part two. We are just going to finish up real quick. We're going to sail right through this. We're going to talk about our last two kinds of rock. Then we are going to get into. I'm just going to introduce this thing called the rock cycle, which you are going to learn to love the rest of this quarter. So before we get started, I found a very cool picture. This is a magma waterfall or a magma fall. There was a massive eruption of the volcano in Hawaii in 1968, and the volcano in Hawaii is always erupting, always putting out a little bit of lava, but in 1968, for some reason, it just blew its top and spilled lava everywhere. Drove people out of their homes. People, like literally probably had to like run and jump on a boat to get away from it. So this is what it looked like as it all ran over a cliff. I can't imagine how many millions of pounds of lava this probably is. I mean, these are trees in the foreground, and this is just a literal river of melted rock. I would really not want to wake up and see that outside in the morning. So, before we get to our last two kinds of rocks, I just want to talk a real quick refresh on this process. It's called compaction. We talked a little bit about this back in our chemistry unit with gases. We talked about pressure and pushing in on gases and expanding and contracting. This is the same thing as that, but just with solids. So think about if you want to go grab a sponge, squeeze it in your hand. That's compaction. You have turned that sponge into a smaller object with pressure. This is the same way that we make roads. Roads are made out of a material that is designed to be compacted into a nice flat surface that's easy to drive on. Asphalt is just little itty bitty rocks and tar. The tar sticks the rocks together. The rocks give a flat surface, and bada bing, bada boom, you can drive a car real nice over it. That's what this device here, steamroller, that's what that's for. It's super heavy. I think they weigh about 20,000 pounds. And they just drive over the stuff and they just squish it all into place. Remember that. So our second kind of rock is called metamorphic. Meta means change. In ancient Greek, these are ancient Greek words. In ancient Greek, meta meant change. Morphic, morphos, meant shape. So change in shape, rock. We can think of this as similar to the process of metamorphosis in caterpillars and butterflies. So a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, changes its shape via this process called metamorphosis. Rocks can do the same thing. So these are two kinds of metamorphic rock over here. This one is called marble. This is made when sandstone, which is a stone made out of sand, gets taken deep underground and compressed. Really, it gets packed in real hot, real squished, and it changes its shape into this beautiful, beautiful white, and with like these lines running through it. Stone marble is beautiful. Sandstone is, it just looks like a regular old rock. So it changes its form. This is another one. This is a type of sedimentary rock that has been heated and squished and compacted down into this very, very tight. You see these layers here show that it was originally a sedimentary rock. Any kind of rock, any of our three kinds, can become metamorphic. All that has to happen for our rock to become metamorphic is it has to get buried deep underground, which can happen to any kind of rock over millions of years. We are going to get to, that's mostly an 8th grade thing, but we'll get there. And then our last kind of rock is what's called sedimentary. It's formed by the laying down of layers of sediment over millions of years. Again, very, very slowly. Sediment is just dirt or sand that gets dissolved into water. So if you've ever seen a river, I'm sure you've seen rivers around here that look kind of muddy and nasty. They're full of what's called sediment. The sediment is in suspension in the water. Those little mud particles are floating around in the water. Slowly, as they go down the river, some of them fall to the bottom, some of them build up on the bottom of the water. Over millions and millions of years, those layers keep laying down on top of each other and keep pressing down and compacting and gluing each other together, and they form rock. That's how sandstone forms. And over millions of years, they form these sediment beds. So we'll go over that process. I have a nice little figure of this happening right here. So the first step is that eroded sediments. We're going to get to erosion soon, promise. They settle out of the water, they fall to the bottom, and they accumulate at the bottom of the river. So with time, more layers pile up, and they press down. They compact those lower layers. As time goes on, more and more layers get laid down, and then in this last part, the other stuff that's in there that's not just the sand, not just the dirt. There's other things in there too. They basically act like glue, and they stick all those particles together, and then you add that compaction in, and you can get some very hard rocks out of just dirt and sand. So that is the process of sedimentation. Then this is the last thing we're going to touch on this week, and then we'll pick up with this next week. I know this is a lot, so we're going to look at it real quick. We're going to skim it. Next week we will go into a lot of detail about it. So right here, I want us to orient ourselves first. We have this gray line through the middle. This is the surface of the earth. Anything that happens above here happens out on where we are on the surface. Anything that happens down here is underground. So we will start down here with our magma. All rock gets recycled in the earth. Like remember, if we remember back to the first quarter when I told you that nothing can be created or destroyed, no matter can be created or destroyed. Things can change their shape though. Rocks can melt, rocks can cool, but the total amount of rock on Earth never changes. I mean, unless we get hit by an asteroid. So that magma, it's hot and it can bubble up to the top, and then it cools, and it can cool in those two ways, either intrusive or extrusive. So remember, intrusive is beneath the surface, extrusive is above the surface. Those igneous rocks can then go on, and they can do this thing called, they can uplift, which is they can move further up to the surface or further above the surface if they're already up there. Then they can outcrop. So outcrop, uplift, those are just, think out, up. They're moving up, moving on up. They're at the top of our chart. Then up here, and what we're going to get to in the next couple of weeks, is weathering, erosion, transportation, deposition, sediment, all that stuff. We're going to go into a lot of detail about it. But rocks can get broken down into smaller pieces. I mean, you take a pickaxe and you could smash a rock into smaller and smaller pieces. The weather does that over hundreds or millions of years. We can just do it really quick. Then it forms sediment. That's how dirt is formed. Or there's many ways, but that's one way that dirt is formed. That sediment can then be buried, compacted, cemented into sedimentary rocks. Those sedimentary rocks can then, they can either go back up top and they can get eroded, turn back into sediment back down here, or they can get buried even deeper. They can get turned into metamorphic rock. And then metamorphic rock here actually can go all kinds of ways. So metamorphic rock can either melt back into lava or magma. It can get buried further and turned into a different kind of metamorphic rock because the amount of heat and pressure determines the kind of rock that forms. So you can actually take one metamorphic rock and turn it into another kind of metamorphic rock. It can get uplifted to the surface. It can then outcrop, weather, erode, then go back down. Or it can turn back into magma, go back up into igneous. So all of these rock types can turn into all of each other. Except sediment can't really turn into igneous, but igneous can turn into sediment. Because if the igneous rock gets eroded, it can then turn into sediment. So this is a cycle. Every part of this is connected in some way. We are going to spend a heck of a lot of time talking about the different connections. This chart we're going to be coming back to for the rest of this quarter. So get used to it, get familiar with it. I hope y'all enjoyed this. We will pick up on Monday, like I said, with a lot more detail. And I hope y'all have a good weekend.